One of the things I really try to instill in them is that there's capital S, capital A, self-assurance, and there's sort of lowercase self-assurance, confidence. I have had some members see that self-assurance is the bottom of their list and feel demoralized, like just almost be in tears of like, how do I move that up? And I really want people to consider that confidence comes in doing well and understanding our own strengths and living in those strengths. That confidence comes in being great in who you are. And that's where we want to focus our energy around that, because I see confidence in people and deliberative and belief, consistency.
Hello and welcome to Coach. Today we are talking about the strength of self-assurance. And I have Kori and Jen with me today. Kori, could you tell our listeners where you are coming in from, a little bit about what you do and your top 5 strengths, please?
Sure. Kori Czasnojc. I have a really unique last name that nobody else has. I'm coming in from the San Francisco Bay Area, and my top 5 strengths are individualization, ideation, activator, strategic, and self-assurance.
Thank you. And a little bit about what you do, Kori.
I have been a consultant in the Sacramento and the San Francisco Bay Area for about 10 years, primarily management, leadership development, organizational development, and I've done some diversity and inclusion work.
Thank you so much. Jen, how about you?
Thank you, Brandon. My name is Jennifer Selke. I run veteran programs for a nonprofit in Atlanta, Georgia. It is founded by a musician named Zach Brown of the Zach Brown Band. I kind of came at that through work as a summer camp director in San Francisco Bay Area for about 27 years. So programming has been a big part of what I do, and I've just shifted that into working with veterans. My top strengths are learner, maximizer, relator. I have self-assurance that we'll be talking about today at number 4, individualization, and then achiever, activator, and focus are 6, 7, 8, and those really still play a big part. So I don't feel like I can't leave them out.
Very good. So we are 2 of you from the same region, Bay Area region. I have had occasion to visit Jen at the camp that she serves at, and it's amazing. So when she shares at the end where to find information about what she does, please do look into it. It's incredible. I got to sit in on a class with veterans and see how they're being supported, and it is just powerful. So amazing. So thank you both for being here today. We're talking about 34 of 34. This is the strength that they say shows up the least frequent in someone's top 5. And so often when it does come up, coaches or practitioners or enthusiasts alike kind of wonder, okay, well, what does this mean about me? And how does this work, in the milieu? How does this play in my job, in my life? And what's the strength of this strength? What's the strength of having and being told I'm self-assured? And so these 2 experts are going to help us along that path, as is the case with some of these strengths. When they fall into my top strengths, this is number 9 for me. I get to also contribute along the way to the conversation as one that has this as a top strength. So my set in order, just to compare, and Kori, if you want to add more to your 5, we can. So I'm maximizer, achiever, activator, strategic arranger, and then I go belief, communication, command, self-assurance. So it sits at 9. 10 for me is competition. So it's in a space of influence strengths for me. Kori, do you want to add to your 5 just for the sake of our...
Yeah, after self-assurance, I have adaptability, woo, connectedness, communication, and maximizer. And I was noticing for Jennifer, myself, I think we overlap by at least 4, which is kind of going to be interesting conversation.
For sure. All right. Well, let's start with this, and either of you can take it. The strength of this strength. So just tell us in your own understanding, you see self-assurance, you've had it probably long enough as an expert in this language to give some definition so you can add your, the textbook Clifton Strengths or even your own version of it. And as in the case in these episodes with two of you, don't worry if we talk over each other, we're just chiming in. So whoever wants to go first, grab it, and then we'll make our way around.
Great. Kori, you want to give it a start?
Sure. When I took, that time it was Strengths Finder. Now it's Gallup Clifton Strengths. But at that time, this was about 14 years ago. And when self-assurance came up in my top 5, it's probably of the 5 that I have in my top that I had the most difficulty with and confusion about. Like, oh, does that mean that I'm arrogant, or does that overly confident? And over the years, I really learned to understand it more and embrace it. And this idea of being able to have a sense of confidence about how I manage and lead my own life makes a lot of sense to me. So it's one of those ones that I think I've been conflicted with, and then I've learned to embrace.
Oh, that's neat. I've had an interesting relationship with confidence in my life since I can remember growing up. My mom always said the one thing she had just, prayed, hoped, dreamed that I would have was confidence, because she grew up and was a not confident kid. So it was like she sort of willed this into me. So it was sort of funny when it came up on Clifton Strengths. I kind of, it's just validation from my mom, like, Mom, I'm okay. I think parents just worry for their kid. And so that kind of had a special place. But I see self-assurance as sort of in two forms. There's an inside form for me for self-assurance with that standard inner confidence. And it took me for a while to kind of realize, when I would do a lot of coaching, especially I worked in my career with the 15 to 24-year-old age group. And, if they'd ask for advice or what should I do, it took me a while to really realize the things that I was saying was okay for Jen, because Jen has self-assurance. So go in to talk to that professor. It's okay for Jen because you can just do that. And so there's this sort of inside internal confidence that I feel like self-assurance brings. I really don't equate that with risk-taking, which I can kind of talk about if we have people that are interested in BP10, because my risk-taking is really low. But I do have just an internal grounding of my own thoughts. Externally, I feel like it's sort of perceived by others, which took me a while to really grasp, is that there's just this presence that people feel. And because I just feel the inner confidence, I don't feel that I have presence. I don't feel that I bring this sense of grounding sometimes to a group. It's only because people tell me that I accept it. But so I think there's kind of two sides, is kind of understanding how self-assurance works internally in your own thought process, as well as what does it look like on the outside for other people.
I love that, because in your head, you're thinking one thing, but when you're getting feedback from others, you understand that it actually gets translated differently to others. The same has been true in different ways for me, being just aware of how that comes across. So I was at Intel for 23 years and working a lot with the executives, and I found that the self-assurance really helped me hold my own when I had a strong opinion about something, to be able to influence and move something forward that maybe there was some initial resistance. Contrasting that with when I was an executive at Girl Scouts, I felt like I needed to be really careful about this idea of including others in decision-making and putting my opinion forward that felt really strong and almost like it's set, but it's not really set. So they would think sometimes it would be a direction, when in fact I needed to ratchet it back and say, here's some thoughts versus here's what I think we need to do. Really a different way of being able to make sure that folks have a chance to weigh in.
For someone that, so my pairing of self-assurance with command, I can relate a lot to what you're both saying in, Jen, your comment, presence people feel. And so from a very young age, whether I aspired to or not, I would be elevated into roles where I was asked to lead. So it could be a small group project, it could be a sports team, could be school, student government. I found myself in roles often where I was asked to or implied that I would. And I really appreciate you both recognizing and mentioning the inside game of this, because self-assurance showing up as a strength does not always equate immediately to a confident person internal. There are still fears, there are still doubts, there are still failures one has to work through, and the reality that I'm not all the way who I hope to be. And although this strength can try to mask some of that and present a side that might have greater confidence and awareness than maybe they're feeling. And I do know that side of this. One has called it fake it till you make it. So presenting some front of, I got this. And inside I'm like, no, you don't. and I think there is something about this strength that lets you cross thresholds that you're not feeling all the way ready for. But the strength gives you that extra push to go, I'm taking the risk. I'll step in front. I'll speak out. I'll do the work. And so I've always been able to distill this one down to, Jen, you mentioned risk taking, and Kori, holding your own. And I think that for me, this one showed up a lot in spaces where somebody needed to speak up. Something was being done that required attention, whether it was a systemic problem or just a behavior or something in the culture. And clearly, as if I think of the whole facet of leadership in the home, in the community, in work, this strength has certainly emboldened more willingness to take risks. But as we talk today, I will talk about the mature version of this. Now that I'm crossing 50 and I'm thinking differently about what risk is worth taking, and less of that imposter syndrome, more of I'm seasoned. I know what I know what I don't, and I'm more comfortable. So it is an interesting ride with this. And so I'm going to ask, as part of today, the take from the two of you on the younger version of this that we all experienced, the teen version, the young adult version, because it's the raw version of self-assurance is really interesting, how it can show up, because it wants to be confident. It wants to be bold. It wants to say, I got this. But then there is that internal of, do you though? Do you? And how they bounce back from risk. So some of what we'll get to uncover as we talk through this. I am glad you mentioned the similar strengths you both share in your top set, and the differences. I mean, Kori, your adaptability with self-assurance. I'm so fascinated by that combination. That's such an interesting, maybe not very common at all, sense of two strengths that might come together. It might be one of those pairs that is really, really rare that we almost never see. And then when I look at both of you having individualization with it is also really compelling. So let you both kind of start down this path and explore some of your own, understanding of how your strengths. And Jen, I'll come to you first. When you look at your own set, you look at Kori's, you hear mine, what's starting to come to mind? Questions, thoughts, comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I look at the strengths for myself, my personal awareness always needs to be in where my relationship strengths are, because I have relator and individualization in my top 10. So in a sense, that's kind of what I'm really working with, which doesn't, I always think about strengths that it can be other focused. There's certain strengths that allow you to kind of key in to other people's feeling, that feeling wavelength, things like connectedness with like adaptability, like those things. There's a second wavelength of relationship and people strengths that I'm keying into relator. So there's like a couple people that can kind of connect with, and individualizations, that's cognitive empathy, where I'm kind of really looking at observational data. But that's an awareness for me that I have to keep in mind, because it can mean when self-assurance kicks in with the activator, achiever, that confident drive that gets in, starts, going. if I'm not looking out for other people, I really miss a lot of those cues. So that's that overlap that I need to either have people around me that help me remember that, or that I really have to pay attention to slow down. And sort of where for me the combination I feel like has been my entire career is the combination of self-assurance maximizer individualization is my training and my doctoral degrees in educational psychology. So as a school psychologist, in addition to running large day camps, but as a school psychologist, you're doing a lot of assessments to figure out what are the strengths in the student and where are they struggling. And so I could really present information confidently about this individual. How are they unique? How are they going to be able to get through school if they have a reading disability or a math disability? And that then parlayed into, as a summer camp director, I had 150 staff in the summer, and most of what I did was job coaching. Like, what are you doing after camp? And being able to see people work, and then being able to really, with maximizer individualization, drill down to like, this is how you are awesome. Like, I could lend them my confidence. They could kind of like, well, Jen thinks I can do this. And then they see that they can do it. So it was almost like lending out my self-assurance to people until they saw that they could believe in themselves and how they were great. But that's sort of how I think mine have overlapped. And I'd be really interested in hearing from Kori, because you have some of those relationship strengths that I don't, and how that plays into your self-assurance.
You know how we start our coaching business on a high, only to get absolutely overwhelmed by the business side of things? We're suddenly supposed to be a full-time salesperson, marketing funnel maker, email marketing expert, social media manager, customer service rep, and tech expert all in one. Yeah, overwhelm. Well, Lisa Cummings, our strengths coach friend, created a membership that gives you an insane member vault that will blow your mind. All the tools, systems, and templates to save you time and money. It's the actual assets Lisa used at Lead Through Strengths to build a successful strengths coaching business. All the assets are yours to customize and make your very own. She even gives you 2 years worth of emails you can use to serve your customers. So check it out at podcast.34strong.com, Lead Through Strengths. Again, podcast.34strong.com, Lead Through Strengths, from Lisa Cummings.
It's interesting. I loved hearing about your individualization with the self-assurance and lending that out. That's so wonderful. And then this idea of the maximizer. So as you're counseling or coaching your students, it seems very similar to the coaching practice I have, right? Of looking at, and I think it's the reason why I was a little surprised individualization came out number one, because the others feel much more core of who I am. But it really comes out of my love of strengths and my love of coaching others and really trying to figure out how they kind of all fit together. So hearing you say that is really cool. When I think about my core, that actually is, the coin with two sides, because I always have to manage dialing it up and dialing it down. It's the activator and the ideation. With the self-assurance and strategic, kind of the top 5 coming together, because the activator and ideation really get me into trouble when I dial it up too much, because I have too much on my plate, too many ideas I'm activating, and then I have to ratchet it back. And then as I'm moving into self-assurance, this idea of like, oh, I can do all this. And it's like, no, I can't. So I need to, and that's maybe a little bit, Brandon, where adaptability comes in, because adaptability is situational, right? With the self-assurance, because adaptability is, I can be adaptable, with friends on what we decide to do for the day or where we're going to go for dinner. But when I am really clear about a direction, I think my self-assurance kicks in, especially more in a work environment where I think that this is the right direction. This is the right thing we need to do. This is what the employee survey is telling us, or what the data is telling us, and driving that forward in a very collaborative, but using a lot of influencing strengths that I have. I have, I think, 5 of the 8 influencing in my top 10, which is, I think, somewhat unique from when I've seen different grids of teams where a lot of teams don't have any influencing themes at all. So I see that coming up. The other thing that I've noticed is that I've gravitated toward women that, and I actually want to do more work around this, women that have self-assurance. And how does that come up in the work environment? I've talked to another strengths coach that has self-assurance, and I don't know the exact data on this, but I would imagine that there may be more men that have self-assurance in their top 10 versus women. And how that comes up in regard to, does that feel like it gets embraced in the workplace, or do you feel like there's a little bit of resistance to it? Have you had any experience with that, Jen?
I spent my career in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I would say I didn't have any experience in seeing that as a liability. I was at UC Berkeley, so I think that's a completely different work environment. I would say moving to the South, going from San Francisco to Atlanta, I do notice a bit of a difference in sort of my presentation style is not really a Southern woman presentation style. So I've had to reassess. My business partner, I have a company called Work Strengths, and I have a business partner, Betsy Flanagan, who does a lot of work with women's groups, and I would be, she'd want to invite me along, and I'm like, I just don't get why women need their own group, because just talk at the just talk at the meeting, like, what's the problem, and so it was kind of funny, because now that I'm in a different sort of culture, being in the South, I had to I think that's kind of part of the trait of self-assurance, right? You sort of think like, what's the problem? I'm right. This is how it is. Just speak up. And now that I'm in a different context, I'm like, oh, now I get what she was talking about all that time. And I think that's kind of it can be a self-assurance trait, is like, I'm kind of backtracking a little bit because my experiences weren't of that. And now that they are, I'm like, oh, I should reevaluate. I kind of want to go back and go, remember that time I said I don't get why this is a thing? Like, I was wrong. I get why it's a thing now.
It's very fascinating. I've done a lot of work with women in leadership, and I understand that, but also at the same time, there's certain things, to your point, just speak up. But I also know that that's very hard for many people.
Absolutely. And now I have that perspective.
Do you think with the self-assurance and what might be misunderstood about this strength, is admission of being wrong one of those areas that someone hiding self-assurance has to be aware of? Or because there's such a confidence that I've noticed over the years when I know I'm right, I know this is the right step. Because I have found, and maybe you two can validate this strength that has a lot of natural instinct to it. Just this awareness, this inner, no, this is the right path. And depending on how the other strengths play, I have high strategic, as I see for you, Kori, you share. So I really do think I'm right when I have something. And I have a team member who has said, sometimes because you're right and how you're trying to move the room, you're creating your own internal resistance by presenting too strong. And it was a fascinating mirror for me to go, oh, she said, we trust your instincts. Have it be okay that you've put it in front of the room, and then the room, your leaders can help you sort how it's going to go without having to tell them. And it's been a great learn on this one of understanding that just because I see it and I'm pretty sure I'm right, and I hate to say I told you so I try never to use those words, when a different path is chosen. But there is that, record, if you will. Like, if you're going to do wins and losses, this one seems to live more in the win column. And so as such, I'm curious how you two have learned to manage that, how you've developed that over the years and position yourself, where You can express what you think there needs to be before you have to, gavel down and say, this is the way. This is what we're doing. Because that holding your own core, you said earlier, yeah, there's that space, but there's also, all right, but when is it okay to give room for others to explore how they think it's going to go?
Mm-hmm. So important too. It's so important to step back and make that space and acknowledge that. And it's kind of like the gas and the brake at the same time. When do you want to step on the gas? When you want to do, pedal to the metal versus when do you want to ease off a little bit, and allow space, because it's so important for engagement.
Yeah, I know for me, this was kind of an early career learning. I started in 1994 running large summer day camps at UC Berkeley. So it was, 100 plus staff, 2,000 kids in the summer. And there's nothing more humbling than working with the 15 to 24-year-old age group for basically your whole career, because especially as they moved into the millennial generation, they just don't hold back on telling you what they think about you and your performance. So I got a lot of great, real feedback. And one of the things I noticed as the programs grew is that in the beginning, I was able to sort of just take charge and make it happen on my own. But as I grew the program, it was kind of like a sole proprietor. Like, if you cannot delegate, you cannot grow. And delegation is one of my top entrepreneurial strengths. And what I had to shift, it's kind of the maximizer self-assurance, is that, maybe I do feel like I know the best way forward and I'm confident this is the best way. But as I started to recognize I needed to grow a team of young people at, 18, 17, 18, 19, who needed to think and try their way, that I needed to turn over control. And so when that mental shift came, that what the learner creates, they learn. I have learner number one. So I'm about people learning, and the thread that really encompasses my career is helping people figure out their strengths to find work they love. And so camp gave me an opportunity to coach young people, and they needed to be able to try their own way of how they were, assuming it didn't cause a safety issue or a big customer service problem for, young people and parents. I needed to let them try if they had a new idea of how we were going to do checkout or how we were going to do attendance or whatever, morning announcements, whatever that was. I needed to give them space to try because they needed to learn to work a problem that failed. And once I made that shift, then I was able to step back, and it sort of my confidence became directed at their strengths with maximizer individualization and confidence in their ability to learn and try something and fix something that didn't work, that it became less about me and my ideas and my way of doing things. And then that kind of shifted more into belief in them. But that was really hard as somebody who, especially with the maximizer, like, I feel like this is the best way to do it. Why wouldn't you just do it my way? And so that was a critical shift in me turning over control. And it just became a whole model of like life skills. Like, you need to figure this out. And you need to fail, and in order to have a safe place to fail. And I think that's really what made it a great place to work.
That's great. Why do the two of you think this is such a rare strength in the world? Why is this 34 of 34? So few of us see it in top 5. You two are top 5s. I'm a top 10, more 10s than 5s, obviously. But why do you think? Because it's not. This is not just we're all U.S. based. It's not just U.S. Clifton Strengths is now 35 million, I think, at count, or 36 million global participants, and this still remains 34 of 34. I know it used to flop with Command. It's now holding its own. It is the rare of the rare. Any thoughts, theories, ideas on why you think that might be?
That is such a great question, because I think that there's some potentially cultural elements, right? When we talk about, if you want to equate it to the opposite of modesty, that some cultures really value that. I honestly, from my experience, I can't answer your question, Brandon, because I haven't done research around it. But what I would say is that I do personally feel a lot like an outlier because of that strength, and maybe even just a combination of my strong influencing themes. I do feel like an outlier in regard to corporate culture and corporate norms, and some cultures that value that more than, corporate cultures that value that more than others. So after Intel, I went to several other organizations and I found like I was even more of an outlier than where I was at Intel, where Intel valued people speaking up. They had a big cultural element of constructive confrontation, attacking the issue, not the person. And so I think they valued more vocalization, and I think some cultures tend to want to push that down a little bit more. Is kind of my observation.
Do you ever feel lonely as a coach or solopreneur? What if you had a place where you could surround yourself with like-minded coaches who truly get you, where learning, sharing, and growing together is the norm? Connect, Learn, and Share, started by Charlotte Blair, is a vibrant community of Clifton Strengths coaches from around the world. Hosted on the Circle platform, it's a place where you'll find people, processes, and events to help you grow your business, enhance your coaching and facilitation skills, and thrive in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment. Connect with coaches from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Learn through a calendar of recorded events across time zones, and share your knowledge in a community built on an abundance mindset rooted in strengths. Visit podcast.34strong.com to learn more. Again, podcast.34strong.com to learn more about the Connect, Learn, and Share community.
I know self-assurance and the work I do with military members that are transitioning out of the service. And, we have a program, they do the Clifton Strengths. I do a lot of workshops around that and a lot of coaching. And one of the things I really try to instill in them is that there's, capital S, capital A, self-assurance, and there's sort of lowercase self-assurance, confidence. Because a lot of, I have had some members see that self-assurance is the bottom of their list and feel demoralized, just almost be in tears of like, how do I move that up? And I really want people to consider that confidence comes in doing well and understanding our own strengths and living in those strengths. That confidence comes in being great in who you are. And that's where we want to focus our energy around that, because I see confidence in people and deliberative and belief, consistency. My husband has consistency and harmony, and sometimes it looks like self-assurance when he is, this is how it's supposed to be done. So I like to look also at self-assurance that overlap with sort of presence, because if we see that confidence is really across the spectrum, that it's not just inner confidence that's part of that trait and that theme, but it's also this presence. There's this calm in chaos. There's this, I know what we're going to do right now. And that's the piece that I think isn't in a great supply, partially because especially when I talk to military members, like when I say how many influencers do we need in the military and how many executors do we need? Like how many people need to get stuff done? And so I think that there's a reason it is sort of distributed, in a smaller percentile, because it's just not. I mean, imagine if we all had self-assurance, like we need all the strengths to be well-rounded, and some we need achiever, learner, right? Some we need in more supply than others, and I feel like that's in my mind, like, why has it been selected? Why hasn't it been selected? If you think of just evolution and how personality grows, like we need people that get stuff done, learn, empathy, like a lot of those relationship strengths. We just don't need a lot of people that can say like, I'm calm, follow me. That's why I think command ends up being low. Like, how many people do we need at the tip of the spear? We just don't need that many. So I think it's kind of selected that way.
I think what's great about what you said, though, and one of the reasons I think why we all love strengths so much is that it gives others the opportunity for that self-awareness and embracing their superpowers to lift up and be more confident in how they're naturally wired, versus that one person that you were talking to that felt bad. Like, how do I lift up my self-assurance if it's my 34? This right versus wrong answer. The same thing with, showing people the four quadrants. And it's like, well, I'm missing this. I'm out of balance. There's not a right or wrong here. You embrace yourself for who you are and lift up more of those things that are so great about you. And I think if we could continue to do that, it is a movement, right? It is a movement that builds greater power in everybody.
I've read in the past that of all 34 strengths, self-assurance is the most volatile from a test-retest standpoint. It's the one that moves the most in any given percentage. So it's a wild card in that way because it can show up high, can move down, show up low, move up, because what you're both representing is that there has to be some learned aspects of this one, some way that we can grow. I've always broke down Clifton strengths, and especially the last now 6 years, where I think of it as core strengths and growth strengths versus just dominant. So the strengths that we're born with, the genetically coded ones that are akin to eye color, we didn't choose them, they chose us, and make the most of it because you're never going to unbe it. But then there's growth that become more inherent as life required it of us. And, brain science tells us, we could change all through our life. Brain plasticity tells us with enough intention and effort that we can do a lot to become what our life requires of us when it's required. But then there's the third category that really helped open up my thinking, which was learned behaviors. And when I have seen retest over the years with people I've worked with and even my own, they move quite a bit inside of someone's profile because they're needed now, but not desired later. So I needed it, I engaged with it. And then if I were to go back, yeah, you could go back down to the 20s. I don't really want you up here. You don't really fit my day-to-day dominant. And self-assurance is one I wonder if it's one that can be, to your point, Jen, about people that can learn it. But I will give a caveat, though, that the fourth kind of strength that I've learned over the years is just strictly a weakness, meaning put all the effort you want into being better at it. You won't pass average. It just won't, you will not, you're always going to feel like you're walking in the mud. You're always going to feel like you're missing traction. And so with this one, I have noticed in the thousands of profiles I've seen, to your point, like, is someone deficient if they're not strong in it as compared to someone that, do they have an advantage? Well, that depends on what you're asking them to do, right? It depends what your role is, what you're needed for. If you are in a position where you're leading and you have this strength to bring, yeah, it's a great one. But with that, I was looking up a stat while we were talking what Gallup currently puts it at. It's less than 4% of people will have this top 5. And of that, it is disproportionate men to women. And so if you have this, it is a gift, an opportunity, and a big watch out because these rare strengths can be so easily misunderstood for what they're not. And learning how to bring them forward for what they are and what they contribute is really the opportunity of a strengths-based approach in any setting. And so as we're rounding our time, I'd love to hear some final thoughts from both of you, just on how you might give our listeners a last nugget on what we can learn from this particular strength as use cases, how it's served you well, where you have seen the best of this in your experiences. I'll come to you first, Kori, on that question.
Wow, I thought you were going to go to Jen.
Okay, Jen, I'd come to you. Go ahead, Jen.
I think a big part for me is understanding how other people perceive me. My coach in college said, I played softball. My coach, I remember saying I was intimidating, which I'm like very introverted. It was never a perception I had of myself. And I sort of come back later taking strengths and understand like, oh, that's probably what that was. Why am I stopped in the store and always asked where things are? There's just this, people just think something about you that I don't think about myself. So that was a big part. And then in a director role, I'm often running programs and I'm at the top of the food chain on an org chart. I'm introverted, so people don't know what I'm thinking. And then I come in with self-assurance and maximizer, and it can separate, and relator can really separate me from a group unintentionally. And I had to learn to really explain what I was thinking. So narrating my thinking helped a lot, so people would know what was in my head. Otherwise, they make it up. People are self-writing, and they're going to try to tell a story about your behavior. So if I can understand, they think I'm they're just naturally going to think I'm intimidating. Here's what I need to do. That relator that can kind of pull me away. Also highlighting mistakes, like especially when I'm working with young people, I just as an activator, like I can move pretty quickly and cover a mistake pretty fast. And what I found is that was doing me no favors because my team sort of thought I didn't make mistakes. And that's the worst thing I want a high school, young college student to think, is that I'm perfect. And so I had to start highlighting like, man, I really screwed this up, or this is what I did wrong, so that people would see like I don't do everything right. And then it's okay for you to also do things incorrectly and recover. Another piece that's helpful if you have self-assurance high or even have high confidence, recognize you're confident, is find a role where people can really lean on you. That's a big part in terms of, I think, how self-assurance can be sort of misconstrued, is that it's just confidence. But over time, what I've learned is that, especially in a programming mode where, things are happening, things are moving at a quick pace, people just like me to be there. And that was a hard thing for me to accept because I have achiever, I have folk, like I'm ready to get things done, and you're just giving me credit for just being here. And that really felt unearned. I just missed a couple days in a program recently I was running, and the team was like, we can totally do this without you, but it's better when you're here. Like, it's just knowing you're in the hallway working just makes us all feel better. And so that's a big thing, is that I had to learn, now that I'm approaching 60, that idea that it is okay to lend your presence and have that be your contribution, as opposed to it being some executing task you ran. So kind of coming to terms, and that's true for a lot of the influencing strengths. Like sometimes it feels like, what am I really contributing if I'm not doing a thing? Sometimes the thing you're doing is being present.
Thank you, Jen, for going first, because I feel like it's reinforcement for some of my thoughts, and it's also a contrast as well. I tend to be more extroverted, and so I'm thinking out loud. And sometimes that thinking out loud combined with the self-assurance may be difficult for people to track. And the ideation, the activator, right? So, and the strategic, like Kori's going here and she's going there and she's got this idea. And I don't really know what's important to you at this point. So that extroversion or thinking out loud contrasting with the self-assurance and even some of my other talent themes can not be easy to follow. So from an opposite perspective of when everything's internal and people don't know what you're thinking because it's inside, versus it can have the opposite liability of being too much, TMI, too much information. I also feel like this idea of, for leaders, many leaders, especially in the executive ranks, have challenges with stepping back. And so I would suspect that there would be a high level of self-assurance in this idea of, again, giving space when there's brainstorming. And how do you manage your own, to your point, Jen, how do you manage your own participation level? And how do you actually enable or empower the group to do more things on their own, even though there's a strong inclination to jump in and play and participate and contribute and give ideas, this idea of knowing when to step back a little bit more. And I think it gives, again, that great opportunity for delegation, for development, for growth. And so it's a constant, I think, a dance of and a self-awareness of knowing what feels like the right thing. And it's not going to be perfect all the time because I've made so many mistakes and this idea of sharing the mistakes openly that because the confidence may feel like, oh, Kori knows exactly what she's doing. In fact, sometimes I really feel a great deal of sense of direction on things, and other things it's like, well, we're going to experiment, figure things out, and that's a little bit of strategic and activator, even ideation coming forward. But this idea of saying, well, we're going to try this out, but we could also try it out this way. We could try it out that way. And how do we want to do things differently versus always feeling like it needs to be a certain direction. So I think there's an experimental nature to it as well as a kind of a give and take.
Excellent. Thank you both for contributing today on this amazing strength of self-assurance. And listeners, you've received some very rich insights today, and encourage you to pass this show along to someone that might be curious about this strength. Since Gallup reports only 4% of us have this in our top 5. You don't know many who have it in their top 5, but there are almost always questions about it. And there's a curiosity and a wonderment about how to coach someone with this, especially when it's not a theme you share. And so some insights that might provide some useful feedback and direction for you. Kori, I'm going to come back to you. If you want to give the listeners a little more insight into what you're doing and where they can find you, I'm sure they would appreciate that.
My consulting practice, which has been, I've been an independent consultant for about 10 years, has never created a website. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, and finding me by my last name, my first and last name. I think I'm the only one, so there aren't any duplicates with that first and last name. And I love doing organizational development work, employee engagement. The diversity and inclusion work is actually still going on, so I'm enjoying that a great deal. And my depth of experience is leadership development.
Very good. Thank you. Jen?
Well, you can definitely connect with me personally on LinkedIn, and you can find me organizationally at campsouthernground.org. That is the nonprofit founded by Zach Brown. And really, we have, we're kind of dual mission. We have summer camps for kids, both on the spectrum, military kids in just general sleepaway camp kids. So it's a great inclusion model program, which our founder, Zach Brown, who was a camp kid, really believes in the idea of inclusion and bringing all people together in a summer camp experience. So that's what we do in the summer. And then the rest of the year, we have 9 months of programs for military veterans and first responders. So those veterans, that are transitioning out of the service, like what in the world do you do, when you're getting out of that uniform? And that's where our Clifton Strengths coaching comes into play. And then we have another program that includes first responders as well as military veterans that help them transform trauma. A lot of our first responders and military veterans, pay a great price for choosing a job of, protecting society, protecting their community. And the consequence really cannot be a diminished life. And so what we're providing is, training to help them learn how to transform that trauma, that post-traumatic growth model. How do you take deep struggle and turn it into strength? And so all our programs, our veteran programs are offered at no cost. We have amazing donors who give money to pay for travel, pay for their on-site lodging, food, curriculum. And so it's really just been an amazing sort of second career as I retired from UC Berkeley to kind of move to Atlanta and, end my life running programs. My husband was a military veteran. He was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Army. We come from a military family. So this is just a great way for me to kind of tie a career into giving back to the people who've really given the most.
Awesome. And as I said, I've had occasion this last year to visit Jen there, and it is amazing. The state-of-the-art facilities, the coolest treehouse you'll ever see, ever. expansive grounds, lots of opportunities for people to connect. Truly a cause worth supporting. Both of you, thank you so much for being here today. Listeners, again, thanks for tuning in. And this has been a really special episode in terms of bringing you a strength that does have quite a bit of depth and meaning, but can be misunderstood. And so with those takeaways, we hope that you'll be able to grow in your knowledge and your practice and your experience. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Coach to Coach.
That's a wrap on this episode of Coach to Coach. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're a strengths coach looking to dive deeper, join the Coach Strong community. It's where coaches like you come together to share insights, support one another, and discover partnership opportunities. Be part of the conversations that are elevating our industry. Email community@34strong.com to join today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on Coach to Coach. Stay strong.